Hill. I'm the president of the Psychology Club, and this is our research project presentation.
I'm Jordan Southern, and I'm the vice president of the Psychology Club.
So our original purpose for the study was to look at personality traits and see how they related to stress. Our variables are both quantitative, which means we're looking at how much of a certain trait applied to certain people and how much stress applied to them, and looking at the relationship between the two variables.
Last fall, we decided to pick something, focus our research on something that actually pertained to college students. And we found that stress, I think all college students can actually relate with. And in the winter, we decided to connect it with personality, to see if there was something unique about a person that made them more vulnerable or just more likely to get stressed. And then by the fall, we developed our question. And then by the summer, we were into doing the actual research.
So the trait theorist that we decided to look at was Carl Jung, and we used his personality traits. The first two traits were extroversion and introversion. Most people think as extroversion and introversion as the degree to which people are sociable, which is not exactly true. That's not how Carl Jung intended these terms to be. Extroversion is the degree which somebody feels that they gain energy from their external world, whereas extroversion is the degree which people gain energy from within. The next two traits, I don't know if many people have heard of this, but sensing and intuitive. Sensients are people that look at concepts, not for the big picture, but for the little details of it. They look at like the small, incremental details. Whereas intuitives, they just care about the big picture, they don't care about the small, little fine print, they care about big concept. Now we have fillers and thinkers. Fillers are people who are motivated by their emotions, and they do things because they have a sense inside that tells them to do it, like some kind of emotional type feeling. They feel like they do things because they feel like it's right. Whereas thinkers do things because they have an analytical process that tells them to do it, and they're more logical than the fillers. Fillers don't care whether it's logical, they care because they have an emotional feeling that tells them to do something. Now we have perceivers and judgers. Perceivers are people who do things not in a exactly organized manner. They don't really care about strategic planning, they just take things as they come. Whereas judgers, they feel uncomfortable when things aren't planned out. They have to plan out everything. Everything has to be on time, it has to be well organized ahead, well planned out. And anyways, we decided to use the Curiosity personality test to judge how extroverted or introverted someone is, to judge how much of these traits apply to individuals. One of the bigger personality tests is Myers-Briggs personality test, which people pay lots of money for, and it's longer and it's a pain in the butt. Like it costs like $1,000. It costs about $1,000 to just first on campus. Whereas Curiosity, it's free, it's simpler, it's shorter. Yeah.
So for our stress, we decided to try to cover all the areas. So we covered physical appearance, physical health, family, job, school, friendships, romantic relationships, international issues, national issues, local issues, environmental issues, social change, and economy. And within these, participants were asked whether they were not stressed, a little stressed, some stressed, and a lot stressed. And we scored them from 0 to 3. And we made sure that on each question, the order of the responses were mixed up. So people weren't just going down and just checking the same one over and over. They actually had to read through, and they were to pick something that actually was accurate. The max score was 36, and no one actually scored a 36, and no one scored a 0, which was expected. So our participants fell within the range of about 5 to 30, and majority of them pretty much in the middle. So we had a good variety, which was expected.
So our pilot study took place last summer, summer 2013. The original purpose of our pilot study was to see if we'd actually get meaningful results from the study, and whether a big long, hard study throughout the year would actually be meaningful for our time. We used an online survey which stayed up for about 2 weeks. Our mediums to display the survey was both on Facebook and through the college website, and we had over 40 responses.
So we went in thinking pretty much 4 questions that we wanted to answer. Does the survey project work? Well, we got 40 responses, and we were able to export the results into Excel so we could handle it with ease, which was what we wanted. Is our sample size sufficient? We didn't expect to actually get 40. We thought we were going to get a lot less, so it was really good that people actually did it. And did we get a variety of responses? Yeah, we got more introverts than extroverts, which was obvious because introverts are more likely to be found on the internet and like that the privacy that the internet holds, while extroverts are probably going to be out somewhere else getting their faces known. And then were there any correlations found? We did find a correlation, and it ended up being the same as when we got to our main study. And because of that, we decided to pursue a larger study. So on the larger one, we continued to use the same online survey through SurveyMonkey. We had Facebook and we had a link on Canvas, so when you logged into your Canvas, there it was. We ended up getting 220 responses, and that was the fact that we had it up for about a month, and it was in October and November that we had it, so it was during the fall quarter, and there was a lot of students that attended in the fall quarter versus the summer. And out of those, only 202 were actually completed.
So our paper surveys were exact replica because of the online survey. We dispersed them on campus between campus. Our main reason we wanted to do paper surveys so we could target more extroverted individuals, because we thought that extroverted people would be more likely to want to come up in person to fill out a survey, whereas introverts would probably just be online and do it more anonymous. And after we got only like 30 responses for the paper survey, and some of them had to be audited, so we only had 14 complete paper surveys.
So for our responses, we got a total of 216. Out of that, we had 169 females, 40 males, and 5 people who identified as other. And the age group, we had the youngest person was 16 and the oldest was 64. But a majority of them were between the ages of 20 and the 30 ranges.
So this is our first set of data. It describes the relationship between extroversion, introversion, and stress. This first statistic here is our p-value, which describes how strong the relationship is between the 2 variables. In this case, the p-value was less than 0.0001, which is an extremely significant relationship. So this relationship between stress and these 2 variables, introversion and extroversion, is very strong. The R here denotes the correlational coefficient, which doesn't show exactly that there is a relationship, but it shows exactly what that relationship looks like. In this case, there was a positive correlation between introversion and stress, and a negative correlation between extroversion and stress. So, introverts are more likely to be stressed than extroverts. And it should also be noted that usually the introverts, there's a predictor variable and then there's a criterion variable. In this case, the introversion and extroversion are the predictor variable, so they predict how stressed someone is.
For our sensing and intuition, we found a positive correlation for intuition and a negative for sensing, but as you can see, correlations were rather small, so there wasn't much of an impact. Adding on to that, the p-value was 0.6727, and because it was greater than 0.0001, that means it was very insignificant. So even if there was some type of correlation, there is actually no connection between the 2. So that was pointless.
Here we are, feeling and thinking and the relationship between stress. And you see here, like, there's a line of regression, and normally if there's a strong correlation, you'll see that it'll be slanted, gene slanted, whereas you can't even tell which one, by looking at these graphs, which one has a more positive correlation, which has a more negative correlation, because the line looks extremely straight. The p-value is 0.97, which is the highest p-value you can have is 1, so it's pretty close to 1, which is fairly, very, very, very insignificant. You can't even tell which one's positive correlation and negative correlation, because there really is no relationship between both variables.
So for the last set, we have perceiving and judging. Yet again, we found an insignificant relationship. There was a positive correlation for perceiving and a negative correlation for judging. But it was very small, and the p-value denotes it as insignificant.
So at the end of our study, the only traits that personality traits that actually had a relationship between stress were extrovert and introversion. We found that introverts are more likely to be stressed than extroverts. The more introverted you are, the higher chance of being stressed you have. Again, this is a relational study, not a causational study, so when we're looking at the relationship between both variables, we're not looking at whether one variable causes the other.
So it happens that Robert Eisnick was a trait analysis, and he developed the lemon test, which consisted of taking a drop of lemon and putting it in a person's mouth. They salivated for a couple seconds, and without spitting out, they put cotton balls in their mouth to absorb all the saliva. And then they removed the cotton balls, weighed them, and then they took a test to determine whether they were introverted or extroverted. And afterwards, it found out that introverts produce more saliva than extroverts. Now, the area in the brain that actually controls your salivation is the RAS, which is the reticular activating system. And that's where the signals come in, and then they disperse out to all the areas of the brain to tell you what to trigger things. So, and that area also controls not only salivation, but your response to your environments, your sights, sounds, how you behave. And since introverts make more saliva than extroverts, that means that their RAS system is actually more active. And since your response to your environment is also tied with introverts and extroversion, it's found that there's actually a biological difference in the brains of introverts and extroverts, and that introverts are just already more hyperactive in the brain than extroverts, and they don't require as much stimulation to get on edge. And extroverts seek that stimulation, which is why you would find them more out there in the world, while introverts are already satisfied with their levels, so they tend to gravitate more inside. So, after we did all this, we realized that there was a few things that we could have changed. Our sampling was of convenience and voluntary. When we handed out the papers, we just handed it out to people we knew and people we ran into. We didn't really get out there, and it was all voluntary, so we didn't bargain people to take it and bribe them to take it. It was only Centralia College participants only. We didn't go out into the community and gather. It's not intentionally representative of the general population, so whatever sample size we have there, you can't compare it to the entire population. We didn't have exact good sample size. And then we also didn't include any cultural factors. So we didn't ask people about their ethnicity, and which can have an impact on your personality.
So we decided that if we were to do this again, if we were to do the same study again, we would probably find it a good idea to look at how age, gender, and the actual personality types itself, which would be like, you're an introvert, you're intuitive, you're a filler, you're a judger, so you're INFJ. And so anyways, we would look at these different other factors we could have correlated with stress, or we could have correlated with other specific personality traits. We could have checked for reliability and validity of the stress measure. The personality test has already been tested for that accuracy. We could also decide what if we were to do the limit test ourselves and see how the limit test plays into this whole thing. That would obviously make people get some really interesting results. And if this study were done again, it would be interesting to get all these doctors in and doing their studies.
So we've had a lot of people help us out on this whole project. When it started, Chelsea Sonnenberg and Mackenzie Alexander were co-presidents of the club. They were the ones that really initiated the start of the research project. And we had a couple people who were members of the club that stayed throughout the year, that were part of the planning and getting to the question. By the time we got to the summer, we had Erin Cox and Amanda Forbes helped us immensely with creating the survey and getting it spread out there. And without their help, we wouldn't have been able to get it out there as soon or as efficiently as we did. By the time we got to the fall, we had many people come along who helped us gather data for the main study and help us interpret it. And in the end, me and Jonathan were the ones that did the final analysis. I ended up having to take all of the response data and shrink it down into Excel so we could actually look at it, because there's so much. We had to shrink it down so we just had the specific numbers we needed so we could correlate. And John helped with presenting it and analyzing it, and the discussions. And Mary and Jasmine are here. Mary's Kaplan, and then Jasmine Layden is videotaping us. They were here helping us with this final presentation. They assisted in making this good and creative and hopefully beneficial to you guys.
And they also helped with a lot of input in designing and helping us with the analysis part. I also like to know Erin and Amanda were a really huge part of the college study. And Dr. Neal, we should have put her on here. She was extremely important. She's a PhD, she's a doctorate, so she knows about research and she knows about this stuff. And
she was the one that interpreted the pilot study results. So she was the one that actually showed us how to take the data and actually make sense of it, of how to correlate and how to organize Excel so the correlations are proper. That's why we only ended up correlating just the specific personality traits and not the types, because that would have taken a lot longer. But we still have the data, so in the future the club may continue and try to interpret it. But if it wasn't for Dr. Neal, we would have had no idea what to do with the data once we got it.
she also taught my research methods class. Without that class, I would never have known how to do any of this. So.
And that was going on at the same time as
Yes.
in the summer, so it was kind of an extension of the research methods class.
Yeah, it was fun. Just for the sake of the video, I'd like to name also the names we didn't name all. We have Nick Purcell, Teresa Anderson, William Penham, Derek Milton, Rebecca Marsh, David Finch, Dina Williams, Nadine Rhodes, Yukari Majors, Mary Kaplan, and Debbie Naden. And they're very important for this project as well, so just like to say their names so they have some credit as well.
They were in the background, but even if we took out one of those people, something would have been different by the end of it. We needed all the help we could get. So, do you have any questions? Anything?
How many of you are still going to be here next year and perhaps
Jasmine and Mary.
Jasmine and Mary? Okay.
They're actually our next co-president. We have a co-presidency next year. Mary and Jasmine are taking over, so.
Me and John are graduating. We're heading off to pursue our bachelor's.
Do more research.
Yes. So,
The data will allow us to do, is there a connection between age, is there a connection between gender and stress, is there a connection with different personality types? It would have just required, it's called dummy variables. And And the thought of having to put a bunch of ones and zeros and setting all that stuff up, I think overwhelmed them, and so they went with what they had.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
very
real proud of them.
Yeah.
So introversion and extroversion were the only ones that really had any kind of correlation. Why do you think the other ones didn't? Is there any ideas? I'm curious for that.
When I think about it, because of the limit test, there was a biological factor involved that we can find a connection to how you respond to the environment. But with the others, I personally believe the other traits are more, you learn them as you go on.
They're not
And
just natural.
yeah, it's something you develop and can kind of change depending on. They're probably influenced by biology. It's that nature-nurture debate that's in psychology. But I'm just gonna find this because I keep forgetting what they are.
Sensing, intuition, feeling, thinkers, perceivers, judgers. That's all I got.
Yeah, with those, they're very, it's how someone will respond to the stress. It's like when you get stressed, a sensate person, an intuitive person's probably gonna react a little differently.
Right.
But it's not gonna be connected to them getting stressed. And because stress is basically increased arousal or, of the body and to a state where it's just a little too much, and so things kind of start going
Goes to
haywire.
Fight or flight.
Yeah,
And that's how they choose to deal with it. It's either being logical or
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, and so since it goes straight back to the brain, I think that's why introversion and extroversion are more, it's factors just because it goes straight to the heart of how are you going to initially respond to the action.
Makes sense.
And again, we don't know if one causes the other, or if there's another variable that causes both of them. We don't know unless we did an experiment, which probably would be a longitudinal experiment that went over long periods of time or something. But
Yeah, we're not saying that being an introvert means that you're going to get stressed. It's just saying that as an introvert, the chances of being more vulnerable to stress are higher. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an extrovert out there that gets more stress than an introvert that's out there. That also depends on your environment and how you grow up and other things of how you respond. Because some people might have medical conditions that might cause them higher anxiety. And so that, your personality kind of goes out the window because it's different. So, yeah.
I was thinking that extroverts may have more of a social factor that they can deal with their stress. Maybe because they have people to talk to about their stress, they don't have as much. Or maybe introverts kind of hold it in, but we don't know.
Me and Sean happen to both be introverts, and we definitely handle stress in completely different ways. It is very clear, but we don't really know many. I don't know any extroverts, so I don't. Are you extroverted?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, she's
Like,
extroverted.
hey, hi.
So I definitely know that I definitely get on edge more easily, but the way I handle it is definitely more internal, and it doesn't really get out there. And once I get to a certain point, I think people definitely know I'm stressed. But with extroverts, sometimes, I guess, because they're able to get it out there and just probably talk about it and let people know they're stressed and irritated, that they can get rid of it. But in the end, that also connects to a lot of other factors. So this is just a little tiny factor that roots down to maybe the very center of it. But you can't just assume someone says they're introverted and then automatically think, oh, wow, they must be like just totally stressed out. There's so many stereotypes associated with introverts and extroverts. I believe I learned recently, do you know Johnny Carson? He was a big late host, talk show host on TV. He's really famous. He passed away, but he was immensely introverted and shy, and yet he was a talk show host and was publicly very out there. So being an introvert doesn't mean you're not social, and being an extrovert doesn't mean you're not, you don't keep things to yourself type
But
thing.
Carl Jung didn't intend for those terms to mean anything about sociability. It's just where you're garnering your energy from.
Yeah, so he went to just really the specific definition and just how people have just heard of it and it's evolved is what's changed. So the definitions we gave were the original ones that, just the basic, simple definition to explain.
Any more questions? Nobody?
Okay,
Okay, that was good.
We're done.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.